had a vaccine, and I began to shake uncontrollably.
He just died 33 days later.
I can't hold my head upright.
I collapsed. That's all I remember.
From the very outset, we did not meet the normal conditions required to proceed.
We're going to be talking about the vaccine injured, which the federal government and state agencies pretends doesn't exist.
We went to a local hospital and they treated her like a crazy person.
I see this as a breakdown of our bureaucratic structures that we're supposed to keep us safe.
I think there's a lot of people that don't know that they're injured.
We have substantial data showing miscarriages increased by 300% over the 5-year average.
Pfizer should have been off the market by February 1st of 2021.
300% increase in cancer.
Data reported to Pfizer, it's 8 pages long.
They are novel and unexplained symptoms.
Neurological, over 1,000% increase. 1,000.
The doctor doesn't know what that is and how to treat it.
The mind games are ridiculous.
She was faking it, that it's misinformation.
There is almost no opportunity for justice.
If you can't see it, then you don't know that it needs to be fixed.
It was becoming pretty apparent that the hospital knew something was going on.
The virus stops with every vaccinated person.
In other words, you become a dead end to the virus.
Vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick.
I never knew that was going to be the last time I'd talk to my son.
They know at a very intimate level what's going on with this. They know all of it.
And yet, nobody's coming to the rescue of truth.
All right, gang, welcome on into another episode of Splittin the Atom. We're going to get it right to it today because we've got a very special guest with a very important topic. And I'm so grateful that Dr. Peter McCullough could make some time for us today. And this whole show, gang, is going to be about COVID. I know that there's a lot going on in the world and there's a lot of other things to discuss, but why have we stopped talking about COVID as much as we have when there is so much around it that we still don't know? So I'm going to ask some of the questions that bother me, that you've reached out and sent to me, and I know that Dr. McCullough can answer those questions. So you should know Dr. McCullough. He's been just about everywhere and all over the socials. And let me tell you a little bit about him before we start this interview. Dr. McCullough is an internist, cardiologist, epidemiologist, and he holds degrees from Baylor University, University of Texas, Southwestern Medical School, University of Michigan, and Southern Methodist University. Dr. McCullough has broadly published on a range of topics in medicine with 1,000 publications, 700 citations in the National Library of Medicine. And also, Dr. McCullough is a well-known public figure in medicine and is a frequent contributor on numerous mainstream and independent media platforms. He has been on ABC, Joe Rogan, Fox News, Newsmax, Real America's Voice, just about everywhere you can think of. He's also testified multiple times in the U.S. Senate, U.S. House of Representatives, European Parliament, and many state capitals concerning public health policy. So welcome in, Dr. McCullough.
Wow, I'm tired listening to all that. I can't believe I finally made it on Splitting the Atom. It's terrific experience to be here. And I hope in the next hour we can answer a lot of questions and get people oriented towards the medical truth, since we've had now over 5 years of what many have said is a false narrative from the government and the federal agencies.
Right, doctor. And I want to start at the beginning because although some of my questions seem basic, there's still a lot of people walking around and they don't know. And I'm one of those people. So I ask out loud, and now I'm asking you, what was COVID? Was it a test? Was it gain-of-function research gone wrong? Was it an experiment, a bioweapon, population control? What was it? What is it?
Well, wrapped up into that question is, the virus itself, its origins, the motives. Let me just tell you that the National Library of Medicine, which is kind of our repository for peer-reviewed published literature, not all of it, but a decent proportion of it, has over 500,000 peer-reviewed papers on SARS-CoV-2, the virus, and COVID-19, the illness. So there's actually quite a large knowledge base. On top of that, we've had very extensive evaluation done in multiple countries. In the United States, it's done by the U.S. House of Representatives, the Select Subcommittee for Coronavirus Investigations. So in short, SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. It is in the family of coronaviruses. So before the pandemic, there were 4 human coronaviruses that can cause a cold, a common cold, 4 of them. They're called beta coronaviruses. Separately, bats also have their own coronaviruses. And what was done in the Wuhan Institute of Virology with a joint US-Chinese collaboration was to make a unique virus that took parts of the human virus and parts of the bat virus and manipulated that part, in particular, the spike protein. So here's the final product, the virus. The nucleocapsid is the ball of the virus. That's largely unchanged. It was the spike protein, this little spine on the surface. That's what they manipulated in Wuhan, China. Now, it turns out the plans for the spike protein, the molecular plans, they came from Dr. Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And they've been working on this easily since 2012.
What for?
Well, in the published studies from 2012 forward, the stated purpose was what's called gain of function research. In the 2 papers that Barrick published, one was in Nature Communications in 2015, the other one's Proceedings of the National Academy of Science in 2016. In the papers, they described this creation as a SARS-like Wuhan Institute of Virology CO-1 virus. So they describe it and say that we've manipulated this, we've created this, and it's poised for human emergence. Now, those papers came out in 2015, 2016. They said it was gain of function research because it was started before the Obama funding ban on gain of function research. They thank National Institute of Allergy and Immunology, that's Anthony Fauci, and they thank Peter Daszak, who was the president, still is the president of the EcoHealth Alliance that shuttled the plans for the virus to Wuhan. And of course, they thank Dr. Xingling Li. She's the bat lady. On the first paper, there's no Chinese authors. But the second paper, they include Chinese authors from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And I've read the papers carefully. They created the virus and they intentionally modified it so it could invade human cells, invade humanized respiratory epithelium in animals and kill the animals. So it actually, in the lab, it killed the animals. And then they created a vaccine, a early version of a vaccine to try to save the animals. So in the papers, the stated goal was to create a virus that could make human beings sick and then create what's called a countermeasure, something that could protect against it. It's called a dual purpose research. The Biden administration has put out guidance on this in 2024, saying that this is dual purpose research to create a virus that can get the whole world sick and then create like a vaccine to potentially save the world.
So there's nothing nefarious behind this in your estimation? I mean, I know what's said and what's published, but do you think that there was something else behind that type of research and the vaccine?
No, it boils down to the interpretation of nefarious. Now, in the House Select Subcommittee investigations, when the virus, this human engineered virus leaked out of the lab, the behavior of Fauci and Barrick and Daszak and others involved at the National Institutes of Health and Chapel Hill, the behavior is if they did something wrong. because what they should have done is come out and say, listen, it came out of the lab, something went wrong. Here's the genetic blueprint of this thing. This is what we need to do about it. Instead, what they did is they decided to cover it up. So they held a bunch of conference calls. They got an academic person involved from Scripps Clinic. His name is Christian Anderson, someone from Sydney, Australia, kind of this international group. And they conspired and wrote a paper. It was published April of 2021, April of 2020, and it says the natural proximal origins of SARS-CoV-2. They said, we don't know where it came from, and it didn't come out of the lab. And that was a fraudulent paper. And so the House Select Committees has dug through this and said, listen, Fauci intentionally covered this up because he knew that he was part of this conspiratorial team to make this deadly virus. The Chinese have allowed essentially no investigation in that lab. So when the WHO said they were going to investigate the origins of the virus, on the White House Task Force 1, Trump's first task force, was Rear Admiral Brett Giroir. I'm in Dallas. Brett went to the same medical school I did. He's a very well-respected doctor. So he picked 3 eminent scientists, independent scientists from the United States, to go to Wuhan and investigate where this virus came from. But the WHO said, no, we don't want those 3 people. We want Peter Daszak from the EcoHealth Alliance. Well, Daszak had already been to the lab dozens of times. He was part of the creation of the virus. He was shuttling the plans over there. Daszak had spent, $250,000 of U.S. money flying first class to Wuhan. So Daszak goes over there and he investigates. He goes, well, I don't know where it came from, but it didn't come from the lab. All the time he knew he created this in the lab with the Chinese and Ralph Baric and Anthony Fauci. He knew he did. The papers that were published by Baric, people said, listen, release the genetic code from those papers in 2015, 2016. Let's see if the genetic code matches, what we see people getting sick with. Baric did a press release in 2020. We're not releasing the genetic code. We don't think it's in the public's best interest. The NIH doesn't want us to release the code. So what we're looking at is a US-Chinese collaboration that got the entire world sick, and then they tried to cover it up. And people got sicker and sicker, and doctors like myself had to figure this out. All the while, people were covering it up.
No.
So you're asking, what's the goal?
Yeah. And let me just toss this in there for people that don't, you've got a lot of people also, doctor, hearing World Health Organization. Well, they're great. They take care of us and me and you, and they really care. Follow the money. Is that, why would the World Health Organization protect or lie or
right
or whatever the case may be? Is it just a question of as easy as Bernstein and Woodward follow the money?
Well, they obviously knew it came out of Wuhan. That's the reason why they picked Peter Daszak, because he was helped create it, and in order to try to keep this as tight as a drum. If you look at the stated goals of biosecurity laboratories, and we have over a dozen in the United States. We have a dozen labs in the United States just as dangerous as the Wuhan Institute of Virology. One of them is here in Texas at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. They have all kinds of terrible bugs. Yeah, over a dozen of them. And by the way, there's leaks coming out of these labs relatively frequently, and people get sick, and fortunately things haven't taken off. But this is well summarized in my Focal Point Substack. And they always cite the literature, just like I do. I'll cite every single paper. But the stated aspirations is to, quote, get ahead of nature, to try to figure out what would be the next pandemic and then have an answer ready for it. And so, there's a center that is between the WHO, the World Economic Forum, the Gates Foundation. It's called CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation. Their entire business model is to create new pathogens in labs all over the world and then have an answer for it, a vaccine. And so this came out in Peter Dasik's testimony in the House, where essentially he implied that if a lab or a person, if they held something very dangerous in their hand, like a virus that could get the whole world sick, and they also held the answer, like a vaccine or a therapeutic, that they had power. They had power. And just like you don't hear much about, arms races between many countries, although recently there's been some conflicts, what there is there's a giant biological threat race going on. And you can imagine the negotiating powers. You can imagine the Chinese, in a negotiation saying, listen, we don't like these trade tariffs. We've got COVID-20 ready to go. I think we could spill it on a New York subway.
Wow.
Can you imagine that?
I actually, as sad as this is, yes, doctor, yes, I could. So here we are, and everybody's stressed out. Things are shut down. I bought so much food and hid it away in a closet, and everybody's life was turned upside down, and we were glued to our television sets, and we had nothing else to do but trust those that were talking to us. And they come out with a vaccination and they say it's safe. And I'm just going to tell you straight away, something in me, my discernment said it wasn't trialed. I don't know, but I was under the impression that it takes 6 to 10 years in trials before they allow it to become, commonplace in public. Is that true? And two, how could they tell the vast majority of people that something that they've worked on for a year or less was safe when, how can they get away with that?
Yeah, I published in 2020 a very important op-ed in The Hill, and it was titled The Great Gamble of this COVID-19 vaccine development program. Do you know I was the only public figure that was in view of the House, the Senate, the White House in the world who questioned these vaccines? Even Robert F. Kennedy didn't question these vaccines. No one did. No one in the House, no one in the Senate. No one questioned these vaccines.
What was your initial concern, or when? And by the way, I mean, what bravery it takes to do something like that, because most people would say, why didn't all the medical industry band together and say, hold up, we understand that there's a problem, we understand that there's people are scared, but there's ethics involved here, and there's lives.
But listen, even the strongest voices in the health freedom community, they didn't voice any concerns in 2020. Think about who you can, Cheryl Atkinson or Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan or Kim Iverson. No one said a word in 2020. No one.
How did you navigate those waters?
Well, I mean, I was asked by invitation to write opinion editorials in The Hill, which is a journal widely read by the House, the Senate, and the White House. And Scott Atlas from Stanford was also invited. We are the two doctors advising America, as we are interpreting things. Atlas chose to focus on masks and lockdowns. And I thought to myself, that's not where it's at. That they're not going to do anything anyway. We have to focus on early treatment. That's the most important thing. And then when the vaccines came out, I questioned them. I didn't anticipate how dangerous they were going to be. I basically just said, listen, they're not going to work. I mean, no shot in the arm is very effective against an infectious respiratory virus. I mean, flu shots in most years, are barely do anything. So, and on top of that, it's always a mistake to vaccinate into the middle of a widely prevalent pandemic. It's always a mistake. It should never be done, because if it's done, there's too many people who have the virus will quickly mutate and get around the vaccine. I mean, that's like saying we're going to give everybody an antibiotic on a hospital ward. The bacteria will become superbugs. They'll become resistant. So it was a terrible idea by design. And then when we learned that Pfizer and Moderna were the genetic code for this lethal spike protein. I mean, this was amazing. So it's a synthetic genetic code for the lethal part of the virus, the part of the virus that we knew at that time penetrated the heart and caused heart damage, penetrated the brain, caused strokes, caused incredible blood clotting. People were dying of COVID because of blood clots in the end. It was due to this spike protein, this very unnatural protein designed in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So to give people the genetic code for the lethal part of the virus and no ability to shut off the code. Nobody knew where it would go in the body, how to shut it off. I mean, it was so dangerous by design.
So let me ask you this, doctor, I have relatives who got one shot because they say, oh, I wanted to go to a graduation or I wanted to go see my mother in the nursing home. But they didn't get the booster after booster after booster after that. Are they in danger just as much as somebody who had 6 shots? Is one all it takes?
Sadly, for some, one was lethal. Now, there is a cumulative toxicity, and the early shots, so the ones in 2021 and 2022, were far more dangerous than the Omicron variant boosters that came out in 2023. Far more dangerous. Now, sadly, most people took shots in 2021. But a good website to track is called USA Facts. USA Facts takes the CDC data, which you really can't get to on their website, and you can find out a lot. So since we're splitting the atom here, let me do that. I think you're going to be shocked with these results, and this is legitimate. So let's take you. You are Caucasian, as I am. What percent of white people like us in the United States do you think became fully vaccinated at one time, taking 2 shots? What would you guess?
62%.
50. Half. Now, it turns out what percent actually took, just one shot, at least one shot, that's 55%. So there's a 5% difference. So 5% of people took the shots and took one shot and gave up. Now, the highest rate were actually American Indian and Alaskan natives. They got up to 76% of their population took at least one shot. 63% became fully vaccinated. And there are some encouraging data. For instance, what percent of babies under the age of 2 do you think became fully vaccinated with 2 shots?
10%.
2%.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad I'm wrong.
2. Yeah. You want
so glad I'm wrong.
So it turned out, the overall statistic is 81% of Americans took at least one shot, and 70% at one point in their time were considered fully vaccinated. That's overall. And I testified in the Senate recently. I said, listen, 80% took the vaccine. I was pretty close, but only 70% were fully vaccinated. So that's an important point, meaning there's no way the vaccines can work. I mean, 30% of us were not fully vaccinated. I didn't take these shots. They weren't safe enough for me. The shots in the clinical trials were given in the first month. It's called the primary series. And then there was 2 months of observation. No one could have known what was going to happen on months 3 and 4. No one.
So tell me now, why are people, let's talk about suddenly deaths, doctor, for just a few minutes, because there are people that I know that are terrified. I work out with them and they say, I'm afraid I'm going to drop dead any day, that my heart's going to explode, that my heart will just stop, that I have a friend that suddenly died in his home last year, collapsed. He had blood clots after receiving the vaccination, and time went by, but that was that. And I have 2 girlfriends now. One of my best friends lives in North Carolina. She just found out she's loaded with cancer. And another one that lives close by me, all of a sudden, massive blood clotting, was in the hospital for over a month so they could get that under control, and she's got liver cancer. So what is doing this to these people? Is it that spike protein that's what's doing all this damage, or is there something else in these vaccinations that's awakening cancer? Or, I mean, what's happening here? Because people, and by the way, why aren't more people gathering together on the National Mall and saying, what did you do to us? Where is everybody?
There's an oblivion. People who took the vaccines, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to wash it out of their memory. Most doctors took the vaccine, so when patients come in, they don't even ask about, the doctors don't ask about COVID, and they don't ask about the vaccines. I know that for a fact. I do. I take a careful COVID and vaccine history. The spike protein causes blood clots. It's found in the blood clots. It's not a mystery. The spike protein is the cause of the blood clots, both after the infection and after the vaccine. Now, the spike protein and the genetic code for Pfizer and Moderna are found in the human heart. So they cause myocarditis. They've been found in the blood vessels in the brain and bursted blood vessels and aneurysms. And recently, the genetic code for messenger RNA vaccines has been found directly in cancer. Directly, it's physically there. So we've got a big problem on our hands. We now have a case. I just saw him today in my office, and we are publishing his case, but we have found spike protein and genetic code, in his case, Pfizer, in the human body 3.2 years after they took them.
Oh my goodness. So do they ever leave the body? Ever? Is there any way to detox? This was going to be one of my last questions. Maybe we should save it, but I mean, I've heard all kinds of things to get this stuff out, from baking soda to sour sop to wormwood to, I mean, all kinds of things. And so maybe we should save that, because I actually have another question about what it does to you mentally. I heard you in an interview, you discussed Justin Bieber and Ramsay Hunt disease. And you were saying that basically this vaccination, it debilitated people from doing their things that they love and thrive and just their lives. And so I want to ask you, because with my own mother, and we've now seen, I bring up Justin Bieber because while he might have a lot of problems, people have said in discussions in various chat rooms, and to me, out in my neighborhood, maybe the vaccination does something to your brain. It changes your personality. And so my mother, who she was in a rehab, and that she didn't have the vaccination, but she was put in a special place because she didn't have it. And they were really pushing her when she was in a very weak state to do it. I don't know if she did. But when she came home, she was different, doctor. It's like something's missing. It's not my mother anymore. She's vacant. She stares at the TV all day. She doesn't want to leave the house. She has no life in her eyes. And it's the strangest thing. And so is it possible that so many different things we're seeing, whether it's anger or craziness or depression or catatonic behavior, can we attribute that to the vaccine as well?
All I can do is quote the peer-reviewed literature, and I'm trying to bring it up now, but there has been a recent paper, and I'm an author on it. And in fact, we have demonstrated that there is a risk for psychiatric and neuropsychiatric side effects after COVID vaccines. And let me try to get the exact citation for it. We published it in one of the international journals, and for sure it happens. In the peer-reviewed literature, there's been reports of patients developing a mania where they've simply gone out of their minds. And there's been a huge study from Korea showing, no doubt, the vaccines accelerate the course for Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's. So we think Joe Biden, who publicly took 6 shots, that in fact he may have a vaccine injury state. And now that he's got Gleason grade 9, widely metastatic prostate cancer, probably his pelvis, his lumbosacral spine. I mean, Biden is probably a poster child for what happens when you take 6 COVID-19 vaccines.
Wow, doctor, that's unbelievable. Now, I know that you've been, that's shocking. I mean, but it's not. But when you hear that from somebody like yourself, it's just wild. A film called The Unseen Crisis is a uncensored look at people's lives after the COVID vax and the injuries that they sustained because of it. And I mean, you're in that film. You're everywhere, basically. And honestly, we thank you for that. I mean, there's nothing that hasn't been done that I don't think that you're in. But why? What recourse do people have? Why is there no? And one of the lines in the film was great. It says, this man says, "There's nobody coming to the rescue of truth." And while you're doing that, I just say to myself, why isn't there a mass lawsuit? Why aren't these companies, Pfizer and Moderna, held accountable? You see stories in the Wall Street Journal and the Boston Globe that say unbelievable amount of real estate has been bought by the executives high up, and they're making millions. They still make millions. They're living their best lives. And what they've done is killing people or severely injuring them. And these people, there's nobody fighting for them. What can they do? And why isn't there any, financial recourse for these folks?
So let's start with risk stratification. So people have asked, what should they do if they took a vaccine or if they have multiple rounds of COVID? So I've published in the World Journal of Cardiology a peer-reviewed paper on risk stratification. I think everybody should have a careful vaccine and COVID history documented in their medical record, including, what vaccines they took and what the lot numbers are. That's very important because some vials are more dangerous than others. And then get an antibody test against the spike protein. So you can measure in the blood the amount of antibodies that have been raised against the spike protein. It's an indirect surrogate for how much spike protein the body's been exposed to. You can go to LabCorp or Quest. You can order it yourself on healthlabs.com. Just type in spike antibody, and it'll send the request to a lab you want. Go in there, get it done, just pay for it yourself. You'll get your number. Less than 1,000 is a good number. Progressively higher is concerning. I see blood clots and heart damage at 5,000 and above. And I can tell you that, people with over 1,000, they need detoxification. The lead approach is McCullough protocol, base spike protein detoxification. It's the only scientifically supported, peer-reviewed detoxification approach. I'm the lead author, and the Wellness Company, of which I'm the chief scientific officer, is the only company that offers a combined product that has nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin in a single capsule. And you can take this to help the body clear the spike protein. It takes about a year and, multiple doses per day.
I was going to ask you about that. How long would that take? Doctor, you've done autopsies and you've seen a lot after the after effects of COVID. But I want to ask you, because somebody sent me a text and said, ask Dr. McCullough this. So, and I also want to talk about misinformation, the term misinformation, because you have a lot to say about that. And it's very, very interesting to me. But there's been a lot of information and misinformation all over the place. And one of the things that people tend to see, they're at home scrolling through their phone at night, and they see this video of a man, you know how it is. And they see this man saying, there were 4 COVID patients that came in and I had to embalm them, and so on and so forth. And then he has 4 jars of what look like, I don't even know, wire, white, long. It could either be, I don't know what it is, but he says that was in one patient, that was in another patient. All of this foreign stuff was in these people's bodies. And so this friend of mine said, ask him if that's real. Is that real? Mm-hmm. Is that what you're finding?
Yeah. It's the blood is abnormally clotting after death. Normally it liquefies, and the embalmers just kind of drain it out after they place cannulas in the big vessels. Instead, it's clotting, and these are white fibrous clots. Tom Haviland, who's a retired military leader, he has conducted an embalmer's survey and posted it. And they're finding it in about 70% of corpses. It's probably due to the spike protein left in the human body after the infection and after the vaccine. But it's a horrifying thought that the body's coagulation system is tilted so far now towards coagulation as opposed to thrombolysis and anticoagulation.
Doctor, how could they not know that spike protein would do so much damage to people? I mean, how could they not know?
Well, the House Select Subcommittee, Coronavirus Investigation, and others have actually sadly determined, quote, they knew. For sure, the National Institutes of Health, the CDC, and the FDA knew. There's a slide that was produced October of 2020. This is before the vaccines came out. And it listed the expected side effects of the vaccines, and they nailed them all. Heart damage, myocarditis, blood clots, paralysis, Guillain-Barré syndrome. They're all listed. So they knew these were going to occur. And then when the vaccines were released, the first vaccine released December 10th, 2020 was Pfizer. Pfizer collected data for 90 days. They had an obligation to release that data set to the public and to the FDA. It's called post-marketing data. Instead, Pfizer held it back. The FDA helped Pfizer hold it back for a couple years, and it took a court case. The lawyer for the FDA wanted to hold it back for 55 years. And then when it came out, Pfizer knew about 1,223 deaths shortly after taking their shots. It all happened in December 2020, January and February of 2021. That's a lot of people dying after the shots. 5, 10, 15 deaths, 50, no more than 50. Pfizer should have pulled it off the market. Now the FDA, they knew about this. In fact, they tried to conceal it from the public. The FDA should have told Pfizer to pull it off the market.
So basically, everybody's in bed with one another. I mean, for the average Joe that's, opening his Schlitz tonight and he's listening to this, I mean, that's it? Who's got our back out here? I mean, you have our back. What about RFK Jr.? I wanted to believe that he would do the right thing, but what is he doing for us?
There's three what I call power positions in the United States that really do have the authority to stop these COVID vaccines, pull them off the market. And I've said publicly, if I was in one of these positions, I would have pulled them off the market December 2020. I mean, after the reports of our first few deaths, I would have been on the phone to Pfizer and said, shut it down. Shut it down. This, it's coming true. They're not safe. So, who are those power positions? It's the President of the United States. So that's Trump in 2020, Biden 2021 to 2024, and now Trump again. Now, for Trump and Biden, neither one of them brings up the COVID vaccines. Neither one of them has ever taken questions from an open mic on the vaccines. And both of them supported the vaccines. It's probably the only issue that Trump and Biden agree on. You think if Trump wants to distinguish himself as being an independent maverick, he'd shut down the vaccines. Why is Trump and Biden completely aligned on the vaccines? And people say, well, Trump wouldn't have mandated them. Well, listen, they both took the shots. They both won't take any questions on them. That's worrisome. I know Wayne Root. Wayne is a media personality out of Vegas. He knows Trump really well. He's Trump's friend. Wayne tells me that every time he wants to interview Trump, he lists the vaccines and deaths after vaccines and side effects. And every time Trump crosses it off, he won't talk about it. Okay. The next one is Secretary of Health and Human Services. So under Trump, we had Alex Azar. He didn't do anything. Under Biden, we had Secretary Becerra. He didn't do anything. Now under Trump again, we have Robert F. Kennedy, who before his installation, He knew the vaccines weren't safe. He had me on his podcast. He knows me personally. He was all over saying the vaccines are not safe. He gets nominated. He gets installed. Now Kennedy won't talk about the COVID vaccines in office, won't take questions on an open mic. Now we have FDA commissioner. Now we're down to the third level. Under Trump 1.0, we had Stephen Hahn. Under Biden, we had Robert Califf, a friend of mine, somebody who I know. And now under Trump, we have Dr. Marty Makary. None of them will take questions on these vaccines. All of them actually promoted the vaccines. Makary promoted the vaccines. Califf for sure did. He published it in New England Journal of Medicine.
What's keeping them quiet? It can't just be big pharma.
Well, listen to this. Not a single country in the world has had anyone of their power positions question the vaccines or even take questions on the vaccines. Not a single country in the world has inspected the vaccines for quality or purity, even though there's been great concerns raised about each individual vial being very different from one another. How can this go on? We're 5 years into this, and not a single country will crack on this?
Well, I'm grateful you're out there, that's for sure.
But Nash, look at this. Not a single country has flinched. You can't get the world to agree on anything. You can't get the world to agree on currency or trade or tariffs or nuclear weapons, or the world doesn't agree on anything. How can the world be completely agreed on these vaccines? You think there'd be one country that said, listen, these things are terrible, we're pulling them off the market.
Okay,
now,
Doctor.
There's countries that are very lightly vaccinated, largely because they couldn't afford to buy the vaccines.
Well, yeah, and since you brought that up, I had two more questions, but now we just add one quick one. Why is Bill Gates all over this? The man he's a computer geek. He's not a doctor. He's got money. Why are his fingerprints all over this?
He's been called a philanthrocapitalist. So remember when he essentially was forced out of Microsoft because of racketeering and conspiracy. He formed a foundation, but his foundation essentially acts as an investment house. They invest in biotechnology, and he's promoting biotechnology that he invests in through his foundation. So he heavily invested in BioNTech. That's the company that partnered with Pfizer on the vaccine, and they made a fortune on BioNTech. Gates Foundation invested in this vaccine incubator I talked about called CEPI. And Gates has aspired to mass vaccinate the world for lots of conditions. He said publicly that the financial return on a vaccine is much bigger than any other investment he can make.
That's unbelievable that he would willingly admit that, not even care. Doctor, do you fear for your life? Because if there's a big machine or something dark behind all this and they won't talk about it and you're out front talking about it, I mean, when you turn the key in your car, do you wonder?
No, I've never really had concerns over personal safety. I do know there's great fear. In 2019, I was invited to be a guest lecturer at Harvard. I lectured in 2 divisions, as an endowed visiting professorship. People at Harvard are scared to death of ever having me give a presentation at Harvard again. I was good enough in 2019. Why wouldn't I be good enough now?
Yeah.
Doctors are scared to death of looking me in the eye. The fear is tremendous. The fear in the media. Blaze Studios, their studios are in Dallas, and I've been on multiple shows. I walked right past Glenn Beck, and Glenn knows who I am. He's absolutely terrified. If you were to see the fear in his eyes. Well, think about this. I early on, I'm the first public figure to raise concerns about the vaccines in the Texas Senate in March of 2021. I go on Tucker Carlson, Tucker's couldn't believe it. And before you know it, he goes on a tear and he loses his job on Fox News. Kind of thanks to me getting him started.
Yeah.
I go on Joe Rogan, and all kinds of controversy. That one went up to the White House.
That was a show. That was great.
And Joe Rogan was threatened with a Spotify contract, and Joe's angry and texting me. People are scared to death. They're scared. And they're scared about saying anything about the vaccines. They're scared if they took the vaccines, what's happened to their body. And so the disease that's spreading around is fear. And, and the title of my book is called Courage to Face COVID-19, or Courage to Face All These Pandemic Issues. And what I've said is that courage is not the absence of fear. It's the ability to overcome it. So it's not like I don't have fear. I've developed the ability to overcome it, and so many people have not.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately, just so you know, Jen, Rogan has played a big role. Tucker Carlson has played a role. I've played a role. Now, one of the roles that Rogan played, I think is really big, is he had Mark Zuckerberg on. You probably saw that interview where Zuckerberg admitted that the Biden White House was pressuring him to censor me off of YouTube and censor others off of YouTube. That came out. And, there's a public backlash. Wait a minute, you're censoring critical doctors like Dr. McCullough, key treatment protocols, vaccine safety data. And finally, YouTube dropped all their censorship.
Yes.
And Facebook dropped their censorship. So you could put this show on YouTube and it'll go. You'll probably get a zillion views. And you couldn't put this show on Facebook or YouTube 6 months ago.
Yeah, and the misinformation, that's the last question, doctor. The misinformation is what's driving fear. The lack of information, I guess, that people would look to our government for, or the care or the concern. I mean, that film that I cited earlier, The Unseen Crisis, just the trailer alone, which we showed at the very beginning of the show, if that doesn't break your heart and your spirit and trust in government, I don't say that lightly. I'm an Army vet, but I say to you, doctor, now, the misinformation that they've used and applied, they can do this again. If they did this once, they can do it again. So what is your advice to people now after all of that's said and done? 5 years later, people got injected, they can go get tested, and then they can detox. But what's the final word that you would want to say to people seeing this today?
The final word is think about the pandemic like a war. Like a war. Governments are rarely truthful about what happened in a war. It's too big. Too many people have died. No one admits their culpability. Can you think of any world leader who said, you know what, I was wrong for invading another country. I was wrong. They never do. They never do. And so the pandemic was like a war. Just like no one will come back and say, there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We shouldn't have gone in. No leader's going to say that. No leader's going to say, you know what, we created this virus in Wuhan. We had this mass vaccination plan. It failed miserably, and it was a mistake. No one's big enough in the setting of war to do that. It just hasn't happened through history. And so don't expect any capitulation. The medical doctors are dug in so deep on this. This is very similar to smoking. If you and I were to go to a major medical center in 1950 and say, hey, we're concerned about smoking, the doctors would say, get out of here. Smoking's safe. It's fine. We smoke. Our patients smoke. Everything's fine. 1950, Sir Austin Bradford Hill had the data. He presented it. Smoking caused lung cancer in 1950, and doctors blew him off big time. COVID vaccines cause heart damage, cardiac arrest, and blood clots, and the doctors are blowing patients off big time. How long did it take for smoking? Luther Terry, 1964, Surgeon General report on smoking. He called all the chiefs of medicine to Washington and said, guys, I got bad news. Smoking causes lung cancer. It's always caused lung cancer. You should have seen the look on their faces. I think we're in for 20 years of this. To be honest, we're already 5 years into it. It's a complete debacle. So, misinformation is in a family of propaganda words. It was extensively used in communist Germany and post-World War II communist Russia. So misinformation, malinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer, anti-science, those are 6 propaganda terms. People use propaganda to gain leverage over other people. It happened to me in the U.S. Senate just last month, May 21st, when the ranking Chairman Blumenthal in Senate testimony, I'm very experienced testifying in the Senate now, I've got this down. He said, misinformation. I called him on it. I said, you're trying to get leverage out of me before a word even comes out of my mouth. I mean, that's what people are doing. Oh, he's spreading misinformation. Well, why don't you listen to what's being said? So in my field in medicine, there is no such thing as misinformation. There simply are clinical observations and data and multiple points of view. Misinformation is propaganda. So when people say misinformation, I reject it. I don't use the word. There's simply differing points of view. There's no such thing as anti-science. There's a scientific process. I follow it. There's no such thing as a conspiracy theorist. We're rational theorists. We always have theories, but we're rational theorists. And we're not anti-vaxxers. I've taken a zillion vaccines. You were in the military. I guarantee you have too. We're not anti-vaxxers, but we're vaccine risk aware.
Yes.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I have to go, but thank you so much for having me on the program.
Oh, thank you, doctor. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you today. All right, I know he's got to do some national TV. We'll talk again. That's a powerful show. And again, I've said this last week with Tommy Waller about our grid. This is another show where you want to take notes. There are things you can do to protect yourself, to do if you've gotten the vaccination, to detox. There are plenty of information out there. You can find his website. Just Google Dr. Peter McCullough and keep your mind open because, of course, there's a lot of things that are coming against that man. So we thank him. What a great interview. All right. So, guys, I also want you to do something for me. Check out oceanstatecurrent.com because there's a lot of great shows that you can also find over there. Of course, In the Dugout with Mike Stenhouse, Red Tide Radio, and Road Rage. I love Road Rage with Larry and Adam. These guys are great. You got to check it out, okay? And you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on X. You can find me on Instagram. I also write a column for Rhode-IslandNewsToday.com. That drops every Wednesday. So, I don't know. Check it out. You might like it. So, again, I'm just going to say this is the last time I'm going to say it. I think, what do you guys think? The shows are getting a little bit better, a little bit better. Hang in there with me. We're going to put a lot of really good work together. But I thank you for watching this week. And remember, you are not crazy when you ask questions. You're just curious. That's it, gang. Class dismissed.